For the first time in over 25 years, Long Island's congressional delegation is composed entirely of Republicans. One may assume they would all get together, but that could not be further from the truth. 3rd District Representative George Santos has been facing mounting calls for his resignation from those even within his own party after it was discovered that he had lied about many portions of his life, including his education and work history. Santos is under investigation by the House Ethics Committee and has been federally charged on 13 counts relating to wire fraud, money laundering, theft of public funds, and making false statements to the House of Representatives. What you are about to see is my entire sit-down interview with the first-term congressman, where we spoke about his legislative agenda, the charges against him, and what he would say to voters as he eyes re-election. Congressman George Santos, I want to thank you for taking the time to meet with me here today. It is nice and air-conditioned here in your office. It is 90 degrees out there. It's sweltering. I want to start by asking you, how's your summer been going? How have you been dealing with all this heat?
Well, I've been working on my tan, but thanks for stopping by. It's been great. We're just, it is really hot, and we're like trying to figure out what's with this heat in September, right? Like, yikes! I was hoping for windier days, but no, it's been great. Like, just being back in the district all of August has been wonderful to reconnect. Obviously, people airing grievances, and you just got to listen, and you need to be humble about stuff, and you pick your head up and you keep moving forward. But it's been great. It's like the interactions with constituents have been fantastic, and I'm just really happy to continue to service them.
Well, I want to start off by talking a bit about your policy. In March, you introduced the Equality and Physical Accountability Protection Act, which, if passed, would stop funding the countries that discriminate based on one's identity. At the same time, more and more transgender athletes from sporting events have been getting banned in states across the country, which has drawn criticism from the LGBTQ plus community. What more would you like to do to help those who identify as LGBTQ plus?
So here's how I look at it. My bill that was introduced, I think, is probably the most comprehensive pro-LGBT and fiscally responsible bill introduced this Congress so far, and I've never seen a bill of its nature, right? What better way to save American taxpayer dollars than to stop funding countries that really harm people of different stripes? And there's a sister bill to that that's also for protecting women's rights, right? Equally abroad when we're doing foreign aid. Back at home, the trans issue in adolescence and in collegiate competitive sports is very simple. It's very unfair to young women when we have biological men competing with them at a twist of a conversion, let's call it this way. And I'll give the hot button that everybody likes to go to, which I think is unfair, but let's talk about Leah Thomas for a second. A year before she decided to start competing as a female athlete, she was competing as a male. So it's not like she has been undergoing transition since she's 12, 13, and gradually done that. No, she just flipped the switch, which means she still has all that, biological male power, especially when swimming against biological females who are going to be disadvantaged. So this isn't about exclusionary. This is about really accommodating and making this make sense, because the way that was performed, it didn't make sense.
But what would you say to those who don't think it's inclusive, who don't think something like that is accommodating? It's just, setting people out.
I think that it's not about singling out trans women. It's about being inclusive of women and recognizing that women also have their dedicated sport and space. And let's not forget that women fought for years to have their space. And for us to be meddling with that now seems almost prohibitive. And I hate to be crass and to be, I don't want to be diminutive towards the trans community. One of my best friends in life is a trans, and we've been friends for 15 years and love her. Your lifestyle doesn't impede on me. To each their own, live and let live. But I think it's very important to identify this one small factor. We cannot have incursions in women's rights, specifically in small things like sports, because then what's next, right? So I think we need to create perhaps their own category, or perhaps have parameters of if a trans athlete, male to female, engaged in what I disagree, but whatever, to each their own. Again, in transitioning pre-puberty, that's a whole different story. But even then, then that means we're going to be pushing pre-puberty hormone blockers, which I think is something also that it's a very, I'm not a doctor, so it's a very complicated subject because I think it can also have long-term effects that we don't know what they can be. So look, it's an uncomfortable conversation. I don't think that we're ever going to get to a happy medium where everybody's going to agree, but we have to do it in a kind way. Kindness goes a long way here. Like vile vitriol and political rhetoric is not the way to go.
Now, I also want to ask you about another bill you co-sponsored earlier this year that would make an AR-15 rifle the national gun of the United States. AR-15s have been used in several of the most fatal shootings in America, from Parkland to Las Vegas. You still want to make the weapon a nationally recognized American symbol.
So the bill's not mine. It was approached to me on the House floor as simple as, hey, we don't have a national gun. Let's make the AR-15. It's made in America, creates American jobs. Just like the whole spiel. I'm like, yeah, sure. I don't see why not. We have a national pretty much everything, right? And then I've gotten criticism and feedback. Hey, why not the musket? We won the revolution with a musket. We'll make that it's not my bill. It's not my idea, right? I was pitched by a colleague. I was being supportive of a colleague. As far as the gun that's been used for events such as Parkland and Las Vegas and many others, it's unfortunate. But I stand by the fact that it's not the gun that's the perpetrator. It is the person holding the gun and pulling the trigger. We need to address this as a mental health crisis, because the day I see a gun grow legs and go shoot people, then I'll ban guns. But until that day, I stand firm in the belief that we need to have a better grasp at mental health in this country.
But what would you say to those who believe that bill, which you co-sponsored, will only go to create a culture that leads to more violence?
You know, I disagree that it would create a culture of more violence, and I'll give you an example. The Buffalo shooter last year was taken out by an AR-15 by a very savvy gunman who was a good Samaritan who was nearby and was able to use the gun for good. And I'm pretty sure that hundreds of thousands of times a year, or I don't know, or thousands of times, let's not be so big there, but thousands of times a year, guns are used for the good. Every time a police officer uses a gun is for the good. Every time a military soldier is using a gun, it's for the good. Every time a good Samaritan is using a gun, it's for the good. So to categorize that guns are violence, I think guns impose self-defense more so than assault, as people like to claim. So I disagree that would lead down that path.
Now, we spent this interview thus far talking about policy, but there is a lot of controversy surrounding you and the lies you have told. You've lied about your education, work history, campaign finances, your mother being in the South Tower on September 11th, and more. Can you help people understand why you fabricated so many issues of your life?
So to be and I think I've done this recently on other shows, a lot of the things you said are perpetrated by the media as me saying their lies.
Admitted to a lot
I admitted to not graduating college. Yes, I admitted to that, but I did not admit to fabricating my work history, because I didn't fabricate my work history.
On your resume, it says you have a GMAT of 710.
Like I said,
you say you don't know how that got there.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I admitted to not graduating college, 100%. That was an insecurity. I made that up totally, right? That I did not graduate, but to say that I did not, my work history is fabricated, that's not true. It's not fabricated. So when
you said you didn't work at Citibank though, Citigroup.
So I worked for a company who performed services via a subsidiary, which I did the work, right? So when you're filing a resume for the sake of brevity, you might round things up, but sure, I've already rectified all this. I've gone over this on the record many times, right? So it's out there. So to say it's manufactured, it's not accurate. It's untrue. The case of my mother, I've already gone down this one too. I've made it very clear. I've gone down the case. What was the other thing you brought up? I'm sorry.
Campaign finances.
Campaign finances. That's an ongoing issue that I'm looking very much forward to squashing. And the one thing as a journalist that I think everybody should understand, and for you as a journalist to understand, is I never handled my campaign finances. That's why I paid a fiduciary, right? So I don't know most of the things that I was accused of because I never even saw it. I don't even know what the back end of the FEC reporting filing system looks like. I wouldn't even tell you what it looks like because I couldn't point it on a piece of paper or on a computer screen. So to give you
But
more
you're still
substance,
running for office, and you're going to be in charge of people's
uh,
finances.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat?
You're running for public
Of
office,
course.
and people are paying you to run. You're going to be in charge of a lot of finances. You're going to delegate money to certain
Of
areas of the
course, yeah,
government.
but that's
So when
that
you're saying you don't know
no,
how
you're
that
talking
money
about
went,
campaign finances. That doesn't have to do with the duties I have
but
as a
if
member
you
of
don't know how
Congress.
to handle your campaign finances, should people expect you to know how to delegate money in D.C.?
Of course, one thing is not the same of the other. You're comparing apples to oranges. You're talking about a political system. I know how to. I understand discharges of public money. I understand the management of appropriations and earmarks and community projects. I understand how to balance a budget. I just didn't understand or was familiar with the filing system of the Federal Election Commission, which is very different one from another. Right? I've worked in the private sector. I can tell you and assure you I'm pretty savvy when it comes to actually numbers and getting things done and making sure that we're under budget, on time, and efficient. So that's why if you even look at my trajectory here as my appropriation requests, there were about close to $36 million, and they were predominantly around water project and water quality projects on Long Island because of our contaminated aquifers. So to discount that and compare one to another, it's disingenuous and it's quite frankly indicative of bias reporting, right? To say that if I can't manage the simplicity of a campaign finance, how can I manage and discharge my duties? Just think of it this way. That's why I hired a fiduciary so that I don't have to do it. So if you have any questions on my campaign finances, I would suggest you guys try to contact my fiduciary because my former fiduciary was the one responsible for all those filings, not me.
What would you say to those, because you're also under federal investigation, what would you say to voters in your district who agree with a lot of your policy, who agree with a lot of what you say, but believe you're simply too much of a distraction to serve in the House of Representatives?
I haven't been distracted from my job. Do you know why? I'm not my defense attorney. I have a defense team, and that's their job. My job is to be a member of Congress. My job is to be in the district. My job is to discharge my duties constitutionally. My job is protected and defined by the Constitution, and I feel like I do a very good job with all the things thrown at me. I still manage to put through. We've hosted mobile office hours. We've done hundreds and hundreds of requests here in this office. In this very office you're here, I think probably over 800 passport requests this past summer, which was insane to say the least. And yet we pull through. We issued recently, and I'm very proud. We were able to do a Purple Heart medal postmortem for a family. So we're doing every single absolute aspect of this job, right? The sole exception you can say is I'm not serving on committee because I recused myself because I thought it was appropriate, right? And I think it takes a person who has self-awareness to understand, recuse yourself from committee, clear this stuff out, then resume your job there. And that's what I'm doing.
Now, I mentioned the federal indictment. I do want to ask you about that. You were indicted in May on 13 counts. You've said in the past you would not accept a plea deal, but just yesterday, prosecutors in the case said they were discussing possible paths forward. Has your
Is
stance
that all you read
changed?
from the letter?
I read the entire letter.
Did you read the
But
part that they're giving us more discovery?
will you
Did you read that
accept?
part? That's
Yes,
my
I did
question.
read that
So
part.
do you know that when somebody's giving you more discovery, there's no instances of a plea. There's actually they're building up a case to go to trial. That's how that reads. But if you go into the form of the Daily News and Newsday and all those newspapers, which to them it's easier just to paint out whatever speculative narrative they want, that's what they did. And it's a shame that you would be doing the same.
Well, I'm not going to read the entire letter as a question,
But
but
if you're
are
trying to
you
report it, you should give all the parameters. I've said, look, I'm not having these discussions. I'm not discussing an ongoing investigation in public because this isn't going to be tried in the media. It's going to be tried in a court of law.
Now,
You're not my judge or my jury.
I didn't go to school to be a judge.
There you go. Good.
The indictment also makes mention of the $700,000 you loaned your campaign in 2022 after claiming income of $55,000 in your previous campaign. How did your wealth skyrocket in such a short span of time? Or do you think, the way that's been treated has not been the full picture?
It's not been the full picture. Nobody's getting the full picture. People are getting this piecemeal, whichever way they want. Again, I'm not gonna debate something that's ongoing. I'll save that for for the court dockets.
Okay. And last thing here, what would be your message to third district voters ahead of next year's primary? You have several challengers in the race. Why should they vote for you?
Oh, look, I've made it simple. I have kept every last campaign promise. I have not deferred from one single point. Everything I promised I would do in my campaign for Congress, I have delivered on. From not voting to expand the national debt limit, from voting to secure the southern border, for voting to put a curb and a stop to this actual sovereignty crisis that we're having right now at the southern border with the humanitarian crisis down there, and also from holding Democrats accountable for their bad policies. Look, the reality of it all is I'm a Republican in the 118th Congress, and I'm voting the same way I said I would, conservative all the way. I don't bend. I don't waver. I make sure that every single vote I take is with this district in mind, making sure that it is exactly how I presented I would do it during the campaign. So expect continuance.
And what are your legislative priorities for the remainder of your term?
The remainder of my term is to continue to hammer down on inflation, on immigration, and all the, we can throw all the bells and whistles. But again, water quality on Long Island, very important to me.
Well, Congressman Santos, thank you for taking the time to speak with me
Thank
on
you.
this very, very hot Wednesday. I believe it's Wednesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.